This is Creepy and Geeky, a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and today's episode is part 5 in my Saw series, and it's also my second anniversary episode. Joining me for this episode is my daughter, Katrina, and we'll be talking about Spiral and the recently released Saw X. Welcome to the show, Katrina. Or welcome back to the show.
It's me.
Okay. That was quite the intro. Anyway, but yeah, so this is our what?
I don't know. I don't know what it was.
I don't know either.
Yep. Okay, moving on.
All right. So yes, this is my second anniversary episode. Not that we're gonna do anything super special for it or anything. We're mostly just gonna be talking about Spiral and Saw X, just like we did last year with the first anniversary episode where we talked about the David Gordon Green Halloween movies. So obviously Katrina comes back quite often, but it's always nice to have her back on the anniversary episodes as well, because when it all comes down to it, I had always wanted to do a podcast, and I actually tried to start one with my son Harrison a while ago, and it didn't really go anywhere. But when I was thinking about doing a horror specific podcast this time, that as listeners should already know, that I talked to Katrina about it and was like, hey, let's do something together. She was getting more interested in horror at the time. And so we talked about, where I would introduce her to some horror movies, and then she would watch them and we talk about them. So that was kind of the whole idea behind doing the podcast in the beginning. And then Harrison came onto it just before we launched. And so we decided to kind of do all three of us together. And then that was a little ambitious because both of them have school and work and everything else going on in their lives. So they've had to, not do as many episodes as they may or may not want to do. But yeah. So, but, been going at it strong for 2 years. I've been getting stronger, in fact, because now I'm doing 2 episodes a week instead of just the one. And in the beginning, we weren't even on a weekly schedule, as longtime listeners will know. In the very beginning, it was just kind of like hit or miss when they would come out. But I quickly went to a weekly schedule, thankfully, due to a bunch of awesome guests who have come on and helped me make this a more fun show in a lot of ways. So it's always nice, though, to get Katrina back on the show when she can make it, which is always good.
Which is not often, but
I know I have to harangue her, especially when there's a lot going on. But I try to only give her the episodes that she really wants. That's what it is. She chooses the episodes she wants to do, and then we just sit down and do them once we can fit them into her schedule, that is. So, but yeah, no, here we are 2 years later, still going strong. I still got a whole bunch more. I've got a whole other year planned out at least. So we aren't stopping anytime soon. Katrina will be back quite a bit, actually. She's coming back next week as well. And she's coming back twice next week. So I hope you like Katrina, because she's going to be around a lot.
Yep. So. Hope you like me. Hope you're not tired of me just yet.
No. Everybody likes when you're on. They actually do. They actually like when you or Harrison are both on. So
thanks, guys.
Yeah. So that's cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into talking about this stuff. We're doing you are capping off the end of my Saw series, which is great because for
saving the best for last, obviously.
I'm sure some people would debate that very immensely. A lot of people don't like Spiral, so we're gonna get into this, but this
Oh, I
one's
was talking about
this one.
myself.
Oh, okay. So this this is the reason why you're here for these ones is one, you chose these, and two, because these are
Hmm.
the two that we've actually seen in the theaters. And we saw Spiral. It was maybe what, a month after you started working at the theater that you work at. So
Yeah, probably not even a month.
maybe not. Yeah. So she started working at a theater, and just a little bit after that, Spiral came out, and then we were like, okay, let's go see that. And so we did that because Katrina, you know, when you know what, I'm gonna let you tell the story of how you came to the Saw franchise and horror in general.
Well, okay. So I was in middle school and I was like, I had been afraid of horror movies growing up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait, we need backstory. So
So I had been afraid of horror movies so bad growing up. I loved
right.
Halloween. I loved all things spooky. I loved ghosts. But because I believe in ghosts, I watched a scene from the Paranormal Activity movie, and it was like the second one, and it was when all the cabinets just throw themselves open, and I was scarred. And so ever since then, I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 when that happened. I haven't seen anything since then. So then when I was like 12, 13, 14, I was like, okay, I think it's time enough. I can start looking at some horror movies. And I wanted to watch things that weren't like scary, scary. So
So she chose
I
the Saw franchise to dive into first.
and VHS. I watched one of the
That's
VHS
true. You did
movies.
watch the VHS.
So and then I watched Saw, and I don't know if I saw the other movies because I was just watching what was available on Netflix at the time.
I think you
So
told me at the time you'd watched whatever was available, and it was multiple of the Saw movies.
okay,
Um,
I don't know.
yeah,
I don't remember ever watching the second one, but I may have like watched like another one that was available.
right.
I don't know. But so that's my introduction to the Saw franchise was in middle school when I was like, okay, let's kind of dip my toes into horror. But it's because the reason why Saw didn't affect me nearly as much as Paranormal Activity did, I've rewatched the Paranormal Activity movies recently, and they still scare the shit out of me. Like I legitimately cannot watch those movies right before bed because I will have nightmares. So
That's too funny.
I was able to watch Saw and VHS before bed and not have nightmares, and it's because they don't have those like real life like ghostly aspects that the other movies did.
Right,
And so
right.
they were easier for me to digest and be able to kind of be like, oh, this could never happen. Whereas Paranormal Activity, I believe could happen. Like I genuinely believe that like houses are haunted and have like evil spirits like trying to kill you and shit. Like I believe that. So as much as it may not be true, like overall, like who knows what the truth is. But yeah, so yeah, that's yeah. I still like those kind of well, I like psychological thrillers now more. Like
Right,
Midsummer, Last Night in Soho, Get Out, like those kind of like make you think ones.
right.
Um, so, but I
Eh,
also like the Saw and uh other gory kind of things. And I also like slashers. So I've always liked Scream. So that's
right,
been one of
right.
those horror movies that I've always liked, despite like
Yeah.
everything. So
No, we are definitely a Scream family here. So
yes, yes.
Scream is a
So
family
and I've
affair.
definitely I've definitely told some of this backstory before on like other
I think you have.
episodes.
Yeah. But
So
but I wanted to be
yeah,
retold specifically for this episode. So yeah.
yeah.
And you'll
But
have to retell some of it we will have to tell some of it in our next episode as well. So
mhm.
yeah, so that'll be fun. But yeah, no, so all that being said, we wanted to not only revisit Spiral together, but we also wanted to um we got a chance to go see Saw X now that it's out in theaters. and we went and saw that together, and figured that would be a great time to, uh, it would be the best way to end this series is with Katrina being on the show. Since these two, these are the only two I've ever seen in the theater. I know these are the only two you've seen in the theater. So
Mhm.
I figured this would be really good, especially being that when this episode airs, it'll be about a month after the movie came out. So just
Mhm.
be aware, everybody, that you've had plenty of time now to go watch it. And if you haven't, we are going to be doing lots of spoilers. And so if you haven't, once we hit the Saw X portion of the episode, if you haven't and don't want to be spoiled, tune out then and come back to it after you watch it. So, all right. So we're going to
Definitely
jump
worth the
right in.
watch.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the most acclaimed of the series so far. It's like actually critically acclaimed. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's getting a lot of buzz. A lot of people are liking it. Lots of the hardcore Saw people are really enjoying it. Some are saying it's just middle grounds for them, and I understand that, but a lot of people are really enjoying it and saying it's top tier. So and I'm one of those. So I'm one of those that puts it up in the top. But of course, I'm not a huge Saw person, so your mileage may vary. So, but that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into Spiral, which is again, it's another one of those. This one's called Spiral from the Book of Saw. And this one's kind of a I what their attempt was to create a Saw movie without all the baggage that everything else did. They were getting away from John Kramer, and having him be in the movie or being directly tied to it. That this was mostly inspired by
Mhm.
the actions of John Kramer. And this one follows a cop played by Chris Rock, who was a producer on the movie as well. And he was really the impetus for getting this one made specifically because he was like, "Oh, I have an idea for this movie, and I really like to get it made." And he helped get it made. Brought in and that helped bring in Samuel L. Jackson, which, if anybody doesn't know by now, is one of my favorite actors. And so
Mhm.
it was great seeing him in a fun horror movie. And I really do. I like Spiral. I think that it's different, but I think that was kind of what it needs at times. I think that you need to kind of shock the system a little bit and kind of like, I don't know, get out of your comfort zone. And I'm one of those that fully believes that, the villain in this one has just as much motivation as John Kramer does and any of his minions did. So like for me, this was enjoyable. It was nice to get out of the, especially after rewatching all these. I rewatched them pretty close back to back, and then like as you're going through most of them up until seven, they're also tightly contained, and the timeline is all you know um doubling back on each other, kind of telling you the backstory and all that. That this one just being of itself and just being like a copycat was really fun and interesting to me. Um,
Mhm.
so, what did you think of it, Katrina?
I liked it. I think that the twist in it is really good because, like, rewatching it, I didn't remember what the twist was, and I was still like shocked. I was like, "Oh, oh my God!" And then the scenes for the traps are horrific. Like, they are just absolutely horrible traps, which make this
Right.
movie really fun to watch because it's like it makes you feel like, oh my God, oh no. Like I think that Spiral is
Yeah.
like one of the like I haven't seen a lot of the Saw movies. I've seen like the
Right.
first three and then these last two. Um, but
We
I
definitely should watch more of them.
of the traps that I have seen, I think Spiral has some of the most like intense ones. I know that
And some
the
people would
other Saw
disagree with
movies,
that. Yeah.
I know that other Saw movies have more intense ones. Like Saw number two has some really intense ones. Um, but I think that Spiral does well at keeping the intensity, even though the person doing it is a copycat and it's not
Right.
to like John Kramer's standard, you know?
Right,
but it's
right,
still in that same vein. Um,
right.
and
Well,
it's
and John
definitely
Kramer's, as you go through the franchise, John Kramer's traps always had an out. If the person did what he wanted them to, they could get out of it.
mhm,
And whereas these always seem designed like that the person wasn't going to be able to get out of it without
mhm.
dying. These seemed really destined, like each one of these was more in
Especially the
line.
last one.
Yeah, they're just more in line with kind of what Hoffman did in some of those episodes. And you haven't really, if you haven't seen anything from 4 through 7, you don't really know who
Mhm,
Hoffman is. So but it's yeah, no, I think that the traps are interesting and fun. They're very torturous. I think they're very gory at times. Like the tongue one in the beginning is just like ah. And the finger one, of course, is the one that you always talk
yeah.
about.
It's the
So
one that lives in is burned in my memory because of how like oh my God, it is.
yeah. Um, but yeah, no, I like the traps. I think that they're done well. And yeah, they're a copycat. I mean, obviously they're going to not have the flair of something that
Hmm.
John Kramer designed and everything. They're going to be more rudimentary. But I do like the simplicity of them in a lot of ways too. So
Hmm.
um yeah, it just but I like I like it all. You know, I like that the motivation this time is different. The killer is targeting cops. Um, you know, it's very much a treating the bad cops, uh, getting back at them, while messing with Chris Rock's characters.
And
And
putting
so
this movie into context of the time that
yeah,
it was released about a year after the Black Lives Matter protests were going on.
yeah, and
So
Ferguson and all that. Yeah,
for all of the ACAB like sentiment, which is incredibly justified, this movie did a really good job at really highlighting the bad parts about our law enforcement system in the United States, with
right,
how often cops get protected. And when somebody does actually, quote unquote, tattle, um, they end up getting shunned by the rest of the department because they did the right thing. Because law enforcement is supposed to have this buddy system, this like, if I do a bad thing, nobody says anything because we all want to keep our jobs. That's not the way that jobs are supposed to work. So it kind of, I think,
well, it was very
putting,
timely for
yeah,
the time that it came out
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
So,
And so it would definitely was hitting that vibe,
mm-hmm,
um, that was in the air with all that. So I think that in that way, it also is good because you know, it's for that time period. And
yeah,
so
it did a good
looking
job
back,
with the cultural
yeah,
elements of the time and
yeah,
not like like because it deals with cops. I think because it got released during that time, it did a good job at doing what it needed to do
right.
um to
You know,
have a story surrounding cops.
right. Right. And I think that eventually I think people are going to start looking back on this and it's still too close and I think some people are just going to never enjoy it, some of the hardcore fans, they're just never going to enjoy it. But I think some people will come back around on it and look at it and go, "Okay, you know what? This isn't nearly as bad. Yes, it's not exactly what we wanted, but this is, it's not nearly as bad as what it could have been or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
Especially because it's interesting though that this movie, Jigsaw, the movie Jigsaw and Saw X are all written by the same guys. The same two guys wrote all three of those movies, and all three of them are so interestingly different from each other. Whereas Jigsaw kind of um, came out and made some changes and it brightened up the color palette of everything, because everything in the first seven's kind of just like this gray green tone
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And Jigsaw made it nice and bright and everything. And this one, this one's not as bright, but it's also not just gray and green all the time. And then Saw X goes back into it and goes back into the same world that was between one and two, and gives you all that familiar cozy feelings with Jigsaw and Amanda and everything.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting that they keep going back to these guys, that the producers keep going back to these guys, and they're like, okay, let's do a different story. Because I think ultimately, I think that what they do with each one of these is they're just trying to find something new and interesting to say. And I think they do that with
Yeah.
Spiral. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's a fun movie. It's definitely higher up there for me than some of the earlier sequels, although I do like a lot of the earlier sequels as well. I honestly don't find any of the Saw movies to be bad personally. I think
Hmm.
they're all fairly good and interesting, and it's a fun series once you really watch the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
but
I like the Saw series, of the series that I have seen, which
you need to
are
watch the
not
rest
that
of them.
many. Um,
Well,
they're
technically, if you
definitely
watched
top
one through
five.
three and the latest two, then you've watched half. So you
True.
just need to watch four through eight.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it's a and I like the performances in this one too. Chris Rock, I know he's playing Chris Rock, he's getting his jokes in here and there and everything like that, but I think he can play kind of serious as well. And I think he does here and there. It's obviously joking things up a little bit, making it a little bit more fun in a way. But I think when he needs to be serious, he's serious, and he does that well as well.
Yeah,
I
and I
wish
think
there
the
had been more.
comedy fits within the Saw
Yeah,
kind of like comedy. I don't think it's kind of out of place for this movie for him
yeah,
to
I
be
didn't find it
cracking the jokes that
distracting.
he
Yeah,
does. So, yeah.
yeah. And I the only thing I wish is that we got more Sam Jackson in this movie
Yeah.
because he's barely in it, and it was just like, oh, this would be so much better with more of him in it. Um, but uh, yeah, no, like everybody's really good in this. Anthony Minghella, he's he plays Chris Rock's new partner.
Hmm.
And as we find out in the end, spoilers, he's the bad guy. He's the one doing all the killing. Um, because years ago, when he was a little kid, that his dad was killed by one of the other cops, and that's what he's doing. Is just now he's not Anthony Minghella, sorry, Max Minghella. Um, but he is taking out all these bad cops, and so for all the bad they did, not just to his, to him and his family and everything like that, but to everybody else.
Yeah.
Because there's just a lot of bad cops, and then on top of everything else, they did it all while under Sam Jackson's character, who is Chris Rock's character's father in this, and so uh, when he was like the former captain, and so they were covering things up, and so yeah, it's it's I agree with you. I think the twist is fun. I think finding out that he was the bad guy all along is interesting. Because
Hmm.
he's like somebody who's just like up close and personal to everything the whole time, so that he can kind of manipulate things and and make things all um twisted from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, um,
I like the kind of all the bad guys have to go on a monologue. They
yeah, yeah,
always do. And the one that he goes on is I like the way that I don't know, I like the way that they did it in Spiral because he was younger.
right,
When all of this stuff happened, he didn't really like experience a lot of it firsthand, but he was able to find out about a lot of it as an adult. And he even said that it was tough to be able to get to the same precinct and like the same thing to be his partner and
yeah,
all of that. And he was very manipulative and was able to use the system in his favor
yeah,
and get close to Zeke. So,
yeah.
like, I think he's a very interesting villain and especially because I feel like some like of it's justified. Like, of course, you like killing is like almost never justified, but
Yeah.
like, but especially in the way that like they do it in Saw, which is like really
Yeah,
intense.
yeah.
But I think that it's a very interesting story that was told in Spiral. So
Yeah, no, I think they do a really good job with you know twisting it all together and making it all fit
yeah,
really well. Which is a hallmark of the Saw franchise. You get to the end, you get the whole reveal and all the little tidbits of things that we didn't see that were,
yeah. It
the
doesn't feel like there were
person
any
manipulating.
holes left at the end of the movie either. It felt like
No,
everything was kind of tied nicely in a little neat bow.
right,
So there wasn't any like longing questions after the fact
right,
because most of it was answered in the monologue. So
right. Like, and the interesting thing with this character too is that, like, with the reveal of this character, it feels like his story's done. Like he gets away, and he's gonna get away with this, with what happened and everything, and his game is over. He's done. He
mhm.
got all the revenge he needed to get, and now he's done. So this feels like totally like a one and done. So it doesn't feel like we need to go more into his story at all.
Yeah. And he's not going to come
So
back for Zeke because the whole point about being with Zeke is because he was going to take away his father like he took away his
right,
father. So that's the whole
yeah,
point. So
yeah,
there's
exactly.
no need to come back, which I'm I can see that being an argument for another Spiral movie, but it's done. So,
Yeah, I think that what they did with this one was good enough, and that especially because this one wasn't as super well received. I think it did well, monetarily well enough anyway to greenlight Saw X. But they, I don't know, especially because a lot of the fandom doesn't really care for it, and I think that if they stay away from doing another one of these with these characters and everything like that, I think they'll be perfectly fine.
yeah.
Whereas I think it'd be interesting to pursue some of the stuff that comes earlier than that, maybe with Logan's story. You don't know Logan; he's from Jigsaw, and some of the other characters from the earlier movies. So it'd be interesting to see some of that completion of those ones. But I think you could make the argument that Logan's story is pretty much done as well. So you could just so that may be why they didn't pursue those as much when they went back into going, okay, well, with Saw X, we're gonna do something different. We're gonna fill in a hole here that didn't really exist, but we're gonna fill in a hole that could have existed, and we'll make
Yeah.
an interesting movie out of that. So I honestly don't have a whole ton to say about Spiral, other than just that I enjoyed it. I think that it gets a lot of negativity that I can understand, sure, but that I don't think is necessarily um like it's warranted, fine, but I just like think that it's better than a lot of other like a lot of people say it is.
Yeah.
But I'm also not a huge Saw person, so I
Mhm.
will leave that to the Saw people to
Yeah.
to dissect themselves. So, but uh but that being said, did you have anything else you wanted to say that we didn't talk about with Spiral?
I'm all good.
All right. So we'll go ahead and move into Saw X, which, like we said, just came out a couple of weeks ago as of this airing. So yeah, so now we're gonna get to talking about Saw X. So if anybody is listening who doesn't want to, who hasn't watched the movie yet, um, and doesn't want to be spoiled by anything, here's your chance to cut out now and come back once you have watched the movie, because we are going to spoil it.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, so this movie is Saw X. It is set between the events of the first Saw movie and the second Saw movie. So you don't want to watch this like, so I know there's people who were always like, oh well, like say the Star Wars movies, people are always like, oh well, you could watch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so you can watch them in order, and I'm like, no, you can't. Star Wars movies are best watched if you watch the originals, then watch the prequels. When something is called a prequel, you watch it after the original stuff because it's a prequel to that. It fills in holes and gives you some story that you would possibly have spoiled otherwise. And
I'm
that's
worried
that's
about people coming to watch the Hunger Games movie having not read or watched any of the other Hunger Games movies because they're not gonna understand what is going on.
probably not. But that's the same thing with Saw X. You have to have watched at least one and two before watching, and I would suggest watching even more than one and two, watching several of them, because otherwise another character gets spoiled for you if you try to watch Saw X between one and two. So
Yeah.
so if you don't want to watch this one yet, and you haven't um, and you're going to watch them in whatever order, watch them in release order. That's the best way to watch them. You can, if you don't want to watch Jigsaw and Spiral, that's fine. Watch Saw X after Saw the final chapter. That's the best order to watch everything in. So anyway, that being said, like I said, this one's set between one and two. And this one's more about John Kramer's journey with because we find out that he's got this brain tumor during the course of the original franchise, and that's what's motivating him to uh, make these traps and to start holding people accountable. And in this one, he goes to he finds out about this special procedure that he can possibly do that will hopefully get rid of his cancer. He meets a guy in a group therapy session, and then sees that guy sometime later, and sees and talks to the guy, and the guy tells him about this radical procedure that's involves with a special cocktail of drugs and surgery, and shows this big huge scar across his midsection.
Mm-hmm.
And so then John's like, okay, yeah, I'll take anything. And so he goes, finds out about it, calls them, gets set up for it. And and anybody who's seen the trailer knows what's going to happen. He gets fooled. They don't actually get rid of his cancer. It's all a scam just to steal his money. And they do it to a lot of people. And so John rightfully gets pissed off, and he's going to take his vengeance out on these people. And that's what that's what most of this movie is about. It's about him taking his vengeance out on the people who screwed him over, and have screwed other people over. It's more about just taking these people out of so they can't do it to anybody else anymore.
Yeah.
So he captures them all, puts them all in this this warehouse where they faked his surgery and everything, so it's all in the same location, and it's all down in Mexico. And this also not only brings back Tobin Bell for the first time in a while, it also brings back Shawnee Smith, who plays Amanda. So, which is why you have to watch these afterward, because you don't find out that Amanda is working with Jigsaw with John Kramer until during the events of the second movie. So
Yeah.
this would spoil that pretty heavily. But of course, if you're listening to this, you've probably already watched all the Saw movies. So yeah. But this, I really enjoyed this one. It was really nice to kind of get more time with both Tobin Bell and with Shawnee Smith, in with their characters, and getting to explore those characters a little bit more, because the unfortunate thing is both of their characters are killed off in number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get to see them later on in the series, they do go into a little bit more depth with both of them, but it's always in backstory and always in terms of how it's motivating the current situation and stuff like that. So this was nice to kind of go back and kind of make a more linear storyline, a story beat here with just one story, where you're not jumping around and filling things in, because they have to try to fill in some of that backstory. And so I really enjoyed that, and it gave you a lot of more you could feel more for um both John and Amanda. Gave their characters a lot more depth than they'd
Yeah.
gotten before, which I really enjoyed. So, but what? How did you think of what did you think of the movie?
So I've only seen the like first three and then Spiral
Right,
before this. So I've only seen John Kramer and Amanda. I haven't seen any of the other like various
right,
characters that are introduced in the Saw series. So they're the ones that I know the most. And so being
right.
able to like see kind of like their thought process and also be able to see that they do still have some semblance of empathy. Um, and like
Right.
especially with the kid, like
Yeah.
they don't do anything to anybody who is innocent, which I
Yeah.
think is interesting. Because you know that already watching the Saw series, but you
Right.
can argue that some of the people who are in the trapped in the Saw series don't deserve what they're getting. But
Most do. There's a couple in the franchise that are definitely they don't deserve it, but most of them, at
yeah,
least in some part, do.
yeah.
So yeah.
But it's just like I really like John Kramer as a villain. I think he's a very interesting character, especially because he is kind of like, even though he is a murderer and a serial killer and this terrible person, he still has that like very small, like speck of humanity in him that you can relate to.
Right.
And it's really hard when you relate to a villain because you're like, oh my God, like what? And I think the Saw series does a good thing with being like some like terrible people can still be
Right.
relatable. And
Yeah.
that's not like I don't know
Well,
where I'm going with this,
you
but it's
could
like
no, because you can understand John's motivations. You can
yeah,
understand that he is like rightfully pissed at what
yeah.
happened to him, and that he wants revenge. We would all want that. Like if we were all in that situation, we would all want to do that, do
Hmm.
something to get back at these people.
And if
You
anyone
know,
can do it, it's John Kramer.
yeah, but most people, most people don't have that that thought process of, well, I'm just going to, take them, take them and put them in these, crazy traps and stuff.
Yeah.
And so so yeah, so it's it's just so I mean, and that's what's made, I think that's why a lot of people like the Saw franchise, is that for the most part you can understand, you can empathize with John, and kind of understand his motivations, even if his methods aren't
Yeah.
agreeable. We all agree that, because he tries to say, oh well, I'm not a murderer, I haven't killed anybody, everybody has a chance to
Yeah.
get out of their traps. But it's like, no, you put them in a situation where they either have to maim themselves or die.
Yeah.
And most people are, and especially on a timer, where that makes that more difficult. So, but yeah, I think that what's interesting about this one too is that we get more of Amanda's story, and we see, like, she relates to one of these other, to this victim in this one, because this other victim's a drug addict like she was,
Yeah.
and so she wants to be able to give her more of a chance than any of the others, because she was there, she was in that like position before, and she is just like, I don't feel comfortable killing her, because it's not, she knows from a drug addict's perspective that sometimes you're going to do something awful that you don't want to do, but you have no choice to do because of
Yeah.
the addiction. So
You have to do everything you can just to get a fix, and then
yeah,
it's over. And
exactly.
that's what the girl goes through, is that at the end of it, she gets what she wants, and then she keeps coming back for more stuff from the guy who works at the kennel. So,
Right. Exactly. So
or
yeah,
the
so
vet
it's just,
hospital. I don't know if it's a kennel or a vet hospital.
I think it's a vet, yeah, veterinary hospital. But yeah, it's So I mean that's what I think is interesting about this one, and I think that's what a lot of people are coming out of this one and enjoying it more because of that, because they are um uh being able to get these deeper character moments with these characters, and especially, you know, just getting to live with them a lot more, especially
Yeah.
John, you know, and getting a lot more than we've ever gotten with him. Because we've just gotten bits and pieces along the way. And
Yeah.
this one we just really got to live with him, which is unusual. You don't usually get to live that long and get to empathize with the main villain of the series.
Yeah.
So, but I
And
think that's
like,
what makes this a more interesting series in a lot of ways, because they have tried to humanize him and
yeah.
make him out to be a sympathetic villain.
Yeah, I think they do something good in this movie too, where it's like they have him compared to the woman and the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And those two are just horrible people. They don't
Yeah,
have
they're
any
terrible.
inch of humanity left in them. And it's interesting to see John Kramer looking like the hero in this movie
Yeah, yeah,
because of how horrible those people are. So
yeah,
I think that's another interesting part of this movie is that John Kramer kind of gets to be this kind of heroine, even though he's still playing the villain. But you
yeah,
have like it's weird that you're kind of rooting for John Kramer in this movie.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's like I don't know. It's just a very interesting uh uh it's a difference for Saw movies to
yeah.
be rooting for John Kramer. So it's like it's definitely I definitely think they did a really good job with this movie. Um
Well,
with doing
when you
that.
look when you look at a lot of these Saw movies, when you go through the franchise and everything, usually the people he chooses are pretty bad people.
Yeah.
And you can understand why he's chosen these people. And like, you know, they're pretty despicable, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that you ever root for these people, because I don't think any of
Yeah,
us who
no.
all the movies actually root for any
No.
of these people. You're just kind of like, oh yeah, you're just bad. You know, I don't care if you
Yeah.
die. But you know, it's just, you know, and in this one especially, they really make this doctor out to be just absolutely horrible. She's
Yeah.
far worse than John is, because she's willing to kill the kid, you know.
And she
And
does it
so,
for money. He just does it for his own like
well, he does it for a sense of justice. You know,
mhm.
he's trying to mete out this measure of justice in the world that normally doesn't come. Like, you know, he's trying to give out the karma that usually doesn't come to everybody,
Yeah.
and especially to the worst people. You know, arguably, you know, John gets his measure of karma because he dies. You know, and so, you know, he doesn't get to see, like, you know, the end results of a lot of his work either. um and so this is what makes this series very interesting, and why, you know, it was really fun kind of going through the franchise again for me, and especially, you know, hitting a couple of the ones that I hadn't seen very much, um and getting to now, getting to Saw X, and just really enjoying where this one specifically went as well. And this one's got some gnarly ass traps and deaths and stuff like that. It's
Jesus
just
Christ. Like
they're really bad. Yeah.
it is tough watching this movie sometimes with the stuff that goes on. And one thing to say about the traps in this movie, one of the traps isn't even a trap. It is a imagination sequence that John Kramer goes through while he's in the
Yeah, yeah.
hospital.
Yeah,
And
the
it's
iconic
like,
eye vacuum from the
yeah,
poster. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like that's not even like an actual trap that he does, but it's something that he thinks about. And so that's also like a very interesting thing to see John Kramer's mind is that even if he's not doing this stuff, like even if he's not actively like making the traps or whatever, he's already thinking about the traps as he's seen people do bad stuff. And but the guy ends up like the guy who ends up getting the eye vacuum or whatever in his imagination was
Right.
pickpocketing somebody who was in a coma or like
Yeah.
sleeping or was
And he
on
was
like
trying
life
to
support,
steal from his, yeah.
and he was going to steal his watch and like do all that stuff. And he ends up seeing John Kramer in the hallway, and then he puts
Puts
the
it
stuff
back.
back.
Yeah.
John Kramer says,
Good
he says,
choice.
yeah, good choice. And then he moves on and he doesn't do anything to him. And so I think that that's a very small moment in the movie, but again, I think it's a really interesting insight into who John Kramer is as a person.
Right.
I I I love this movie, honestly. I think that this is like one of my favorite movies this year. Because of all of the kind of like now that I'm like looking back at it and like really talking about it, I'm like, wow, this movie was actually really well made. like, like after it ended, I was like, wow, that was a good movie. But like actually going into all of the aspects of the movie have really like
Yeah.
made me realize like this is a very well done movie. And props to the people who made it and to the actors for doing a good job. Cause I really hate that white bitch. Like I really do.
The
Like,
doctor.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 No, she's horrible. She's
yeah.
absolutely one of the worst people. And just, and I just so love the moment at the end. And again, spoiler alert, but the end, and we're skipping all the way up, but the end when the doctor and her boyfriend uh who also was like faking being a
Mm-hmm.
patient there, um and they supposedly think that he's there to help them or whatever. They when they think they've got the upper hand, the doctor and the boyfriend think they've got the upper hand, and it's just such a great moment because they don't, you really know they don't,
Yeah.
and everything just collapses on them at the end, and it's just so satisfying as everything just falls apart for them, and it's just so fun.
Yeah.
I think
It is a
that's
very
what
like good, like euphoric moment of just
yeah,
being like, yes, justice. Like,
this is definitely one of the best of the Saw franchise. I've got it as my number 3 currently on my list of Saw movies, right after 1 and 2. And because I think 1 and 2 are just really strong. But I think Saw X is right up there, is really strong also. And it's currently my number 5 of my favorite, my best horror of 2023 so far. So
real quick,
yeah.
so at Six Flags Over Georgia Fright Fest, there is a Saw 10 section, and or at least like a Saw section. And
Right.
there's a crew member at my work who is a scare actor for Six Flags Over Georgia Fright Fest.
Okay.
And he is the one that is trapped in the needle pit. And all he
Oh,
does all day at work is just scream help as people pass by. And I think
geez.
that is really funny.
That's
um
funny.
I just had to share that because I think that's like a really cool like job is just to be like in a trap and like that's
Just yelling
awesome.
help all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think
that's
that's
funny.
just awesome. I just had to
Hope he
share that.
doesn't.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's funny. That's cool. No, I think this movie is so good because, like I said, you get more with John and Amanda. You get so much more time with them and more depth with them, especially with John. And you get some fun, interesting traps. And this one kind of combines what I like sometimes. So I'm a fan of what they do in number 2 and what they do in number 5, where they are group traps. Um, where it's a group of people that should work together. And if they did, they would get out of it a lot easier than they would like if they don't. But inevitably every time they get whittled down to 1 or 2 or whatever like that, and they would have done so much better if they hadn't done it that way. um and this just always reminds me of the escape room movies in that way, because the
Oh my
escape
God,
room
I was
movies,
literally just thinking about that.
well,
Literally, I
the
was
escape room movies are Saw movies, Saw light movies. They're not as torturous.
I'm
um
like genuinely shocked that you just said that because I was literally thinking about the first escape room movie when you were saying that. I'm like
yeah.
really freaked out right now.
Well, I have a tendency to compare these two franchises just because I think they complement each other well
Yeah.
in some ways. I do think that the escape room movies are kind of like Saw Light,
Hmm.
in some ways, but I think they're a lot of fun. But this new one kind of combines that. It's a group of people. They don't have a chance to work. They don't get to work together to try and get out of of the situation like the other ones do. But they do. Their stuff is kind of combined. They're all in the same room, and they all have to try to like convince each other to do the things they need to do
Hmm.
to get out of it.
They waste like a
And
whole minute of like the 3 minutes they get just deciding on what they're gonna do. And
yeah,
then they spend an actual minute doing what they need to do. And then the last minute is just them going, "Oh, I'm gonna die."
yeah,
So they spend the first minute going, "Oh, I'm gonna die. I don't want to do this." Then they do it for a minute and then they go, "Oh, I'm in so much pain. I'm just gonna die." It's like, shut
yeah.
the fuck up and live. Like, I swear to God, these people are so stupid. Like,
Well, but
you're
that's like the girl, the drug addict girl. She does. She gets through her thing. She barely gets through it, but she gets through it. And
I was so pissed.
yeah, I was really mad at that one because she gets through it. She gets through it, and John is like, "Okay, Amanda, go take her to get help.
Yeah.
Go get her taken to the hospital or whatever." And so she's gonna go do it, but then the doctor gets loose and then steps on her fucking neck and kills her. And it's just like, dude, you obviously have no humanity at all. Like, and that's what kills me is that at least when somebody passes the test, John takes them out and gets them help, and so he's true to his word that if you pass his test, he will help you. And so, that's totally the
You
case
play the
with
game by
Amanda.
his rules, you
Yeah,
win.
exactly.
You may
And
not like
so,
win all
no, you're gonna be
but you
damaged,
win by
but you're
living.
yeah. But yeah, so it's just, yeah, the doctor is such a horrible person, and it just stands in
And I don't
stark
know who that
contrast
actress
to
is who plays the doctor, but she is great at playing a evil fucking person. So props to her because I genuinely hated her.
yeah. Let's see.
Like if I saw her face
Uh,
on the street, I don't know what I would do. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
so I'm probably butchering this name, but it's Synovi Makodi Lund. She's Norwegian.
Oh,
She was in the Netflix series Ragnarok. So yeah, so she's yeah, she hasn't doesn't look like she's been in a ton of stuff. Yeah, no. So, but yeah, no, she's definitely plays that role well. Um and you definitely hate her um by the end of the movie, by the middle of the movie and everything else. Um
yeah.
yeah, no, it's just
The whole movie.
yeah, the whole movie you hate her. But yeah, no, it's you know, I I don't have a lot to say about the movie other than, I really enjoyed it. I think that it does really good at feeling like a part of the overall franchise. And I like that we got time with the characters a little bit more with John especially, and with Amanda as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap it up that we haven't already said?
We've hit everything.
All right. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
You can find me at RCKMNKY on Twitter, and there I have a pinned tweet that has most of my socials on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, you can find her in a couple of different places. But yeah. Um, so that's all we got for this episode. If you haven't already seen Saw X, I believe it's still in theaters. Hopefully, we'll still be in theaters by the time of this airing. If not, it'll probably be on VOD at that point. And you should definitely check it out if you're a fan of the series. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. You'll be back on very soon Actually, you'll be on next week for the start of my Chucky series, where we'll be talking about the original Child's Play and the remake.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a lot of fun.
Woohoo!
All right.
Wait.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks again to Katrina for joining me. On Friday, Donna returns to the show to talk about Black Panther. And then on Monday, like I said, Katrina is back again to help me kick off my Chucky series of episodes with the original Child's Play and the remake. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is a part of the Morbidly Beautiful podcast network. Please check out morbidlybeautiful.com/podcasts for more great shows. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and Blue Sky, and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.